Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I thought it might be useful to give kind of a getting started overview on the Sage 300 CRE Report Designer. It can be kind of a powerful tool, even if you don't explore the advanced capabilities that it has. So, those simple reports can grab a lot of useful data and give them back in a really presentable way. I personally think the easiest way to learn is to just jump right in. So let's say we want to make a report that's going to show the current revised budget, the job to date costs, and the remaining budget for jobs that are currently marked in process. And we want to be able to optionally filter that by project manager. So to do that, we're going to have to identify the information we're going to need in our report. What are the columns we're going to show? What's that? How are we going to present that to people who are looking at the report? Um, so the description we've got for that report is going to tell us directly that we're going to need a revised budget column, a job to date cost column, and a remaining budget. Since we're going to be filtering by status, we're going to add that to the list and we're going to add the project manager because we're filtering by that too. Um, and then we're also, of course, going to need a way to identify what job we're looking at. And that's going to give us a column list of job, project manager, status, budget, job to date cost, and remaining budget. So let's go ahead and mark that down as something we need. So I like to just open up Notepad on here and I forgot to turn something on. Just a second. I like to just open up Notepad and record some of that basic information. So we've got, again, the job column, project manager column, status, budget, job to date costs, and remaining budget. So we'll just kind of keep that off to the side as things that we need. Um, we also need to figure out before we get too far into it, where's that data going to come from? Sometimes that can be a bit tough. In this case, everything we're going to need is on the JC job table. And if you're ever unsure, one of the easiest ways to find a data source is to open up a report that shows you, even if it's at, say, the wrong summary level or slightly more information or not enough information for what you're looking for out of your report, open up an existing report and see what tables it's referencing. And that will usually lead you to the correct place. We'll look at another option to kind of help look for some of those fields, but even that, just with the amount of data that you can store in Sage 300, is overshadowed by just looking at existing reports to find that. So, since we know this time, though, that JC job is the table we're going to need, we're ready to go ahead and open up Report Designer and start building a report. So we've got, again, our column and we know our columns and we know where that data is going to come from. So we'll open up Sage 300 CRE and then we'll open up Report Designer and we'll go ahead and we can ignore these errors on my end. That's just part of my environment. We'll go ahead and open up a new report design by clicking on the new report design. You can also choose File, New Design. Then we'll find the data tables that we want. So you can type the letter just like any of the other fields in Sage 300. Type the first letter of it and it'll take you right down to it. If you accidentally select an extra table, then you can just unselect it. You're looking for the table that you desire to be in the record selected side. If you need more than one table, you can absolutely add several of them in. As long as those tables are related to each other, Sage 300's Report Designer will go ahead and pick up those relations for you. So we'll click OK to open up a new report design with with just a blank screen. And what we're going to do here is just kind of go over a few of the buttons before we get too far into it. So often when you first open it up, you'll find that the field list is not showing. That's this list over here. That's going to be a really useful tool that you almost always want to have showing. So if it doesn't appear, remember that you need to go to View and select Field List. You can also choose this button here. Um, Other important buttons to pay attention to, you're going to want to find in here the open design for existing designs, close design for the design that you currently have open, save and save as, which lets you make a copy of an existing design, for instance, if you just want to make a small modification. And then delete design. If you have a design that you've started work on and it's no good, the easiest way to find the file and delete it is just to open it up in Report Designer and delete it. If you've looked at other reports recently, your recent reports list is down here, and that can be an easy way to come back and work on another report that you were already looking for. And once you're ready to go ahead and add fields to the list, you can come in here and select the row that you want to add that to. If you just open it up fresh and you have that kind of plus icon that was there before, it's going to indicate that you're on the column row or on the first row that it intended to be for your report, and that you can just double click and add column headers in there. I often find it's easier just to type out the column headers myself. So that's what we're going to do for this report design. So we, if you remember, have our column list here: job, project manager status, budget, remaining, or job to date cost, and remaining budget. So let's go ahead and add job. Then we're going to find project manager, and we're doing this adding just by double clicking. In this case, we did happen to actually click right on the exact right row. It's automatically adding our headers for us. That's no problem whether it adds them or not. We'll go over how to change them if you need to. Then we're going to go down and find the revised budget, or in the case of Sage 300, that terminology is going to be the total estimate. And that's down here. Then we also want the job to date cost. That's pretty straightforward, JTD cost. And then, oh, wait, is there a remaining budget? No, there's not a remaining budget by default. We're going to use what is referred to as a formula to calculate that remaining budget. And to create a formula, we'll do that from the Tools menu and go to Formulas. Here, we're going to go ahead and click New. And these formulas are going to act very much like a formula might in, say, Excel. So we're going to find some data that we want to bring in, and we can reference data from somewhere else by saying we want to bring in the, let's find the total estimate again. Did I scroll past it? Yeah, so the total estimate. And we want to subtract from that the job to date cost. And that's going to do that for each row of the report. It will look at what's the total estimate for this row and what's the job to date cost for this row. And each row will get its own value out of this formula, just like if you copied down an Excel formula. When you save it the first time, it's going to ask you for a formula name. So we're just going to go ahead and name this remaining budget. You can include spaces. You can put in really any characters that you would like within these formula names up to a specific number of letters. So it will cut you off automatically when you've reached the maximum number of characters. We'll go ahead and say, okay, we like that formula. So we'll close the formulas. And then we want to add that to our report design as well. So we're going to open up index down here, just like if you were looking to condition any of your like inquiries or things like that, and find design formulas to find the formulas we've created for this report design. We'll say okay, or double click on it, and then we can double click on our field to add it to the report. So now that we've got the formula added, and we've kind of got just this basic report design built, we could start to preview it. We'll go ahead and preview it in this case. If you're in a live environment, the amount of data that you have in something like job cost or AP without setting up filters or things like that is going to make doing a print preview this early in a report design often incredibly slow. So I advise waiting until you've set up a bit more of the report than we have here to go ahead and print preview, but I just kind of want to show you guys what we've got so far, so that we can look at some issues that are common as you run across report building, that aren't straightforward in the design we've seen so far. So we'll go ahead and print preview with the print preview icon up here. You can also use print preview from within the, I think it exists in there when you've got the right thing clicked, but I always use print preview here. And we'll click print preview to show the report. So we can see we've got the job number, the project manager, the total estimate for a job, the job to date cost, and the remaining budget. And it's for every job that's in the system. In the sample data, that's only 15 jobs. In your system, who knows? That could be 30 years of jobs, if you've been on Sage 300 for that long. So we don't want to run that in a normal environment without setting up conditions. But we can see here there's some missing data. We really probably want to see a few more pieces of information about these as we think about how's this going to look to an end user when you've finalized the report. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure that we know what job is this job. Not everybody's going to have the job numbers memorized. So we want to make sure that we include a description. And that's going to be true of just about anything where you have a field that's named like job or vendor or customer or employee. Those are almost always going to be some numeric identifier. You want to make sure you include the description or the name or whichever field goes with that. So we're going to need to add a description field. We're also going to want to include a date. Now, this comes more from, I look at this report and I think, well, how useful is this? I don't know, is Doug really under budget by a significant amount, or is he just barely started with this and his job's going to take, another 6 months to finish? Just right out of the gate, looking at this, not useful to somebody who doesn't know the specifics of the job, even if it is just a summary report. So let's go ahead and go back into it, look at adding a description field, and we're going to go ahead and add some date fields. So we'll close our print preview, we'll cancel out of this menu, and we'll look at what we can do to add more data to this report. If we just go in here and add the description to this report as is, and that clicked in the wrong spot, sorry. If we just go in here and add the description as is, it adds it to the end. We don't want to do that. So we want to have this field come in a different spot. So if you want to delete a field, you select it, hit the delete key, and delete it. That does leave the header. So you'll need to take the entirety of the header and highlight it by clicking and dragging, and then just hit the delete key, and that'll clear that text out. We want to go ahead and bring in the description next to job. So we're going to highlight everything to the right of job, and we want to make sure we get the entire field. If you have text that's right next to each other, make sure you get the entire word, or it won't select all of what you're looking for. And we'll go ahead and just drag this over so we make room for the description. And we'll go ahead and click where we want the left side of description, double click it, and put description in. In this case, it happens to be exactly the right width to give us some space on there, but you could always highlight and move it around again to get a better spacing. We're also going to want those date fields we talked about. It's not useful to just have an end date either. I didn't mention that we were going to include a start date as well, but it's not necessarily useful to know that, oh, there's 6 months left in the job, but when did it start is going to be something you want to know as well. So we'll go ahead and put those in to the left of that budget data after the project manager. So we're going to come in, find the field we're interested in. We want the actual start date, and then we're going to want the end date. And we find that there's the actual completion date, an estimated completion date, or revised completion date. All of these are going to be different completion dates, and maybe we're not really interested in worrying too much about all of them, but something that's actually completed is going to be more accurate than the estimated completed date. However, we're probably going to have an estimated completed date for everything. So we can use a formula to say use the actual completion date if it exists, otherwise, use the estimated completion date so that we have some idea of when we expect that to end. And that's what we're going to do here. So we'll need a formula for that. We'll go back into formulas and we'll take a look at a little bit more advanced piece that we can use with it. So we're going to create another new formula, and we're going to use an if statement in this one to create something new. Um, and the if statement is a little bit more advanced. It's still not a terribly advanced formula. There are a lot of other functions that you can use that are more advanced than this, but it does have its own syntax that you have to remember. In this case, it's the exact same as Excel. So most of you that are even interested in Report Designer will have some familiarity with how it works. But if you ever forget, you can open up the help documentation right from here, and it's going to take you right into information about formulas. And right here is a list of functions. This list of functions covers every function you can use within these formulas, as well as generally how to use them. So if we wanted information on how to use the if, we would come in here, find the if statement, and it would give us a large amount of detail on how to use it. In this case, again, anyone in this is probably familiar with Excel, so we're not going to go too deep into it. We want if, and then there's this. So if this is true, and what we want to find is whether or not the actual completion date has a value in it. And the way we're going to do that is looking to see if it's greater than 0. If you have an empty date field in Sage 300 CRE, it returns a 0 when it's asked for that date value. So if it's greater than 0, if it's not 0, basically, that means there's a date there. So if there's a date there, we're going to use a comma to separate the this. And if it's true, we'll say we want the actual completion date. So if we have one, let's get it. Otherwise, populate the estimated completion date. Then if nothing returns for either of those, neither of them were populated. So we'll go ahead and say OK. And we're going to call this the completion date. We'll say OK. We'll close it. We'll go ahead and add that to the menu. Again, we'll find the index to go over to the design formulas and choose a completion date. Then we can move our fields back into place and take a look at our report again real quick to see if it's got some more useful information. So now we've got the job number. We've got a description of it. So we know that 3001 is the Northwest Food Warehouse, which we might be more familiar with than just a job number. We know when this is started, when it's expected to be completed, or when it was completed. And then we have some more information about it. This being sample data for Sage 300, it goes way back in time to almost 10 years ago. These jobs are actually still in process. And this would be expected to be in the future by a few months for each of these. So now we can see we've got a lot of useful information and a lot of not useful information. And we're going to want to look at conditioning this report. So if we think back to the description, we wanted to see a report that shows us the revised budget, job to date costs, and remaining budget for jobs currently marked in process, optionally filtered by a project manager. So we're going to have some filters here. First, we know that we want in progress jobs, and we want to potentially filter those by project manager. So we're going to be asking for a project manager from the user, but it's optional, so they don't have to use it. And here's where we're going to do something that's A little bit counterintuitive. We're going to require the project manager field when running the report, but blank will be a valid option to use. So we're going to come up and go into Design, Prompt Windows, and use the Required Prompt Windows option. And here we can add prompts and kind of change the way the print this report window looks. So we're going to go ahead and click in here. And we're going to say that we want to create a field. And we're going to call that field Project Manager. It's going to give us options for what to make this field as far as how to restrict input. It's possible to do something like give it an initial value or base it off a field that already exists in the database. You can make it be a number. You can have them check a box or not. It can be a specific time, phone number, social security number, or a drop-down list box. A drop-down list box works well for project managers. If you don't have a lot of turnover, you can always ensure that people are, say, typing Doug Moffat's name correctly. It's simpler, though, to just match something like the project manager field to text and expect people to be careful as they're creating new jobs and editing that job setup data. So it's frequently easier to do that. You don't necessarily have to specify a size in some cases. We're going to go ahead and just say 50. I believe that's the size limit on the project manager name field anyway. And we'll say 50 as well. Sorry, the size is how big is the text input field, and we'll give that 32. It's a little bit easier to fit in the screen. And then we're not going to check the box for required entry, capitals, or say it's a name field. And we'll leave the justification, which is the alignment of the data you're entering, as a left justification. Then the description we'll use as the field prompt. If you didn't want to, it wouldn't have a prompt at all. We'll say OK, and this gives us a field that we can move around this window if we'd like to. So we'll center it, and we can change the size of the parameter box a bit and make it a little tighter. Then we can click test to see what that's going to look like for our users. If you had left this as the original size, it would give this big open space. We don't really need that. So we'll cut this down, makes it look a little neater, a little easier on the eyes. And we'll click OK to save that prompt. Now we have a prompt we're going to work from, and we have the in progress status that we wanted to filter by as well. So if we go to add conditions, we can look at it and know that, okay, we have a status we're going to filter by. And we can find that just by typing status. And we want it to be equal to in progress. We don't care about unstarted jobs and jobs that are already closed. We're going to look at with a different report. We'll look at that from a budget over or under run somewhere else. We're going to go ahead and click OK to add that to the list. And then we're going to add our optional project manager condition. So we'll come in, we'll say we want it to be an and because we want the status to be in progress, and we want the project manager to match our prompt and or the prompt be empty. And then we look at this and we see, oh, that's not going to work, because if this is empty, it would require nothing to be in the project manager field in the job setup if we compare it directly. What we can do with that is use a formula instead. So we'll go ahead and cancel out of this. We'll save the status condition that we had before. And we're going to come in here and we're going to add another formula. And in this formula, we're going to look for the prompt that we added. That's again in the index, like you're looking for other tables. You'll find prompt fields. And we're going to look for if the prompt field is equal to an empty value. We want this to return the keyword true. And true and false make this read back as a true or a false, separate from just like a string of letters like the project manager name. It reads back an actual value of true or false. And we can then use that as a condition to compare against. So if we're looking for a particular row of data to equal out to something that would return into the report when we run it, we would want this to come out as true. So we want to say a blank project manager field is always true because all project managers should return. But if we've populated the project manager field, we want to have it only return true if the project manager in the field we've entered matches the project manager field on the job. So for a true, it's empty, will return true, but in a false instance where it has something in the project manager field, we'll look at the project manager field and say equal to in the job table, the project manager field, and we'll close it. This is a little confusing to read, but if you come into the formula and you actually click on the different project manager fields, you can see what they're referring to. So if the prompt field project manager is empty, then all values are valid. So we'll return true. If, however, there is a value in the prompt field, we'll come to the false section. We'll look again at the prompt field and compare it to the project manager field on the JC job table. And this will return true if they equal each other or false if they don't. So then we have the potential of if this, then it's true. Otherwise, check to see if it's true, is basically what's happening there. So we'll go ahead and click OK. If did I miss just a moment here? It's a little small on my side. Missed a parentheses. So we'll go ahead and fix that back up. So again, just referencing if parentheses project manager from the prompts equals blank, then we want to return true because all of them work. Otherwise, we'll compare it to the project manager on the JC job. We'll click OK. And it's best to go ahead and identify this as a condition formula. So generally, you want to start the name of a condition formula with something like CND to just tell you right off the bat, this is a condition formula. And then we'll call it project manager. So condition project manager. We'll click OK. We'll close this and we'll come back to our design and conditions and we'll add another one. So we want the existing status condition to be true and we want this to be true. So we'll come into the index. We'll look for our formula that we just created in design formulas. And we want that to be equal to true. So we'll check the box here. And it knows that this is going to return true or false because that first argument had it return true. And then it's comparing two things to each other to see if it's true. And so it knows that it's always going to return either true or false. So we'll check the box. We'll say OK. And then we can see that our conditions are in progress jobs where the project manager formula evaluates to true. So we'll click OK. And let's go ahead and print preview this design. So we can see it's asking us for a project manager now. It has conditions. You know that because it's got the two asterisks. And we'll go ahead and print preview to see, can it pull all of them in now? So we can see that, yes, it can pull all of them in, whether it's got a project manager or not, and whether or not that project manager, matches the value put in there. Now we want to go ahead and run it against an existing one. So we'll go ahead and try and run it again, but this time we'll enter Doug Moffat in the project manager prompt, and we'll make sure that that pares it down to just Doug's projects. Okay, great. So we've added a set of data that makes sense. We can actually look at this and see, hey, something is going on here. We can find the actual start date, the completion date that's calculated as either the actually completed date, if it's still marked in progress, but the work's been completed on the job, and we have the job to date cost pulled in, as well as calculating the remaining budget for this particular job. And we can filter by that project manager. And so now we can go ahead and take a look at a couple of other pieces that are going to be important as you build out, little basic reports like this. So the first thing is, this is very plain. We look at it, and yes, it has information, but there's not a tremendous amount here that's bonus as compared to, say, exporting an inquiry to Excel. It's a little bit automatically easier on the eyes than just opening up an Excel document and looking at that. But it doesn't have anything here that makes me go, oh, this is what I want to put in a meeting instead of an Excel document. So we're going to do a little bit of formatting on here to make it a little bit more professional looking. So the first thing we want to do is make the column headers stand out. So we're going to select the column header text, and up here, we can manipulate this a bit. One thing we don't want to do is change the actual default font itself, because that's going to cause the shrink to fit, which is what uh, Sage 300 refers to as the auto sizing, to stop working. So we don't ever really want to change what that text is without knowing exactly what we're doing. So we're going to leave the font alone. And instead, we're going to go ahead and be okay with just marking it bold and underlining it. And what you'll see is this does make this look like it changes position in here. And part of that is from having a what's called monospace font, and other parts of it are just kind of one of those visual glitches of Sage 300. So let's go ahead and review what that looks like now that we've modified that font. So we'll print it again. We don't need to worry about inputting anything in there. And we can see that this does still line up pretty nicely with our columns, but now those stand out a bit. We can tell really what we're looking at. And then we want to go ahead and take a look at what we've got up here in the header and decide if we want to change anything. We probably, for instance, don't care about the record security. We do probably care about the page number, and we might think that job report is just kind of a boring title. So let's go ahead and look at changing those pieces of information. First thing we're going to do, we're going to make this bold as well. So up here in the header section, we'll go ahead and highlight everything, and we'll click bold. And then we can come into the page heading, double click it to get a little bit more potential to modify the way it looks. We'll leave the use system defaults here as checked. The use page heading is checked. You don't really want to change that. Leave the page heading width as variable. Again, you don't really want to change that. But down here and up here, you can make changes to however you want that report to look. So you could give it what's the output file name, who's the person using it. You can include the report date if you want to. You can include the design name, which is whatever you've named the file if you'd like. And you can include or not include whether record security is turned on. We'll keep this pretty basic. The company name, the report title that we're going to change here, and the page number are all we really care about. So we'll go ahead and call this, instead of job report, let's call it remaining budget by job. And you could make it go across the entire top that way, or you could instead give it something like remaining budget and put by job down here as a subtitle, which will look like when we print it like this. So you get a second line, just looks a little bit nicer in some ways. And Now we have something that's a little bit more presentable. You pick this up, oh, okay, weight font is going to be something that I have detail on, while the heavyweight fonts are other pieces of information in the report. So now that we've looked at um, kind of some formatting, we've looked at what information is in here, we can think about a couple of additional little pieces that we might want in a report. Um, so we might want totals. We can add report totals, we could add group level totals and summarizations and things like that. We're only going to cover today just report totals. And you do that in the design menu under totals, and you say, I want report totals. You could break it out by year, you could break it out by various summarization levels, all determined by the information that you're pulling into the report. And you can indicate how you want that to appear as this is a totals row. We're going to go ahead and say overlines in this case. It automatically adds a report totals and fields. Let's go ahead and make those bold to have them stand out a little bit more. And again, you'll see this text all kind of jumbles up. Um, just one of those visual glitches of Sage 300. When we go to print the report, it all lines up. So now we have totals. We have our column headers formatted. We have our header for our report formatted. We have the details we want. We have working conditions, working prompts, and we're ready to go ahead and save this report design and put it on the Sage 300 menu. Let's go ahead and in here, come to File, and we could save the design if we already had this named and saved once with Save, but we'll go ahead and use a Save As, and we'll put this in generally, we'll put it in the report folder under custom reports. You can save this in your main report folder. If you do that, make sure not to name it an existing report design name for a couple of reasons. One, you'll overwrite that existing report design and cause you to lose either one that already exists or a canned report from Sage. And two, you can have your report design overwritten when a year-end upgrade or other major software upgrade comes along and has a new version of that report. So generally save it to a custom report location on the network. And the easiest one is a custom reports folder within the Sage Reports folder itself. So we'll call this, say, BCS for Banger Computers. And then we'll say JC budget by job. It will automatically give us our extension. So we'll just save that here. We know that exists. And then we can close down Report Designer. We can always open up our report again if we need to. We'll come into the job cost module. And again, don't worry about these errors. That's just a peculiarity of my environment. And we'll open up the reports manager. So this part does require that you have access to the reports manager. Earlier, the required you had access to the report designer module. And we're going to go ahead and add a new report. We'll call this meeting budget. And we'll check in our menu group. You just click in there and you can click list to see all of them. We'll check if there's anything that makes sense existing on here already. And I don't really necessarily like any of these for my entry. So I'm going to add a new one just by typing it in here. I'm just going to call it custom this time. Then we're going to select a TS report design for creating it within Sage 300's report designer. There's other options available to you here, of course, including Office Connector reports that you can put directly on your Sage menu. We'll click in the file name for the TS report design and click list, and we'll find our reports folder. for Sage 300, we'll go into our custom reports folder and find our report design that we've just worked with. Now, if you've been on Sage 300 for, let's say, the 30 years that I gave as an example earlier, you're probably going to have many custom reports, and they're not necessarily going to be easy to find just by name. The easiest way when you're finding the report to add to the menu, once you're in the folder where it's stored, just sort by date modified and have that be descending so that the newest date is first. We'll go ahead and click open. That's going to put in the file path. This should, in most cases, actually be a network file path. So you want to see it start with 2 backslashes. That's that character there. And then the server name, and then it's going to go on down in. In this case, we have this development environment as a standalone instance, and this particular path will work just fine. But if you're working in your own environment, you almost certainly want to see 2 backslashes there. If you don't see that, you're probably not inputting it correctly. You can always reach out for assistance to Banger, to Sage support, may be able to help with that, etc. Once we have that file path set, we'll go ahead and click OK. We'll see that it has been entered into this list, and we'll click close. We're going to see a little bit of a delay here. Longer delay if you're on a network than a standalone. What it's doing is updating the reports menu to include the new custom sub menu and the new link to the remaining budget by job report. And we'll click on it and make sure we can run it and see what we expect to see. So since we see what we expect to see, we're happy with this. We can send it out to our end users. If you're the one that designed the report, you can feel free to assume it's completed once you've completed it. Otherwise, if you're building it for your boss, you can reach out to them and say, hey, it's ready for you to review, and check that out. There are some pieces of user security that you will want to pay attention to. If you're not a security administrator or an application administrator, then you will need to have someone else do this part. But once you've added a report to the list, if you don't have access to all the reports, or the users that will be using your report don't have access to it, you do also need to look in security administration at the roles for the users that will be using that report. So we'll open up security administration in Sage 300 desktop, role setup, and then we'll take a look at, let's use this role as an example. We'll take a look at this and find the reports and inquiries, and we'll check the reports for the job cost report that we just added, and we will find, should be, yep, down here at the bottom, the remaining budget by job. You would have to manually add that. For someone that didn't have access to the report before, when you add a new report, you have to go in and manually add that. If you add it to the menu while you're logged in, you'll have access to that report. If, though, you did not have access to that report previously and you have a limited set of reports, your own user has to have this done to it in order to have access to the report when you log back in the next time. So just a little tidbit for making reports with end users that have limited access to reports. Make sure to come in and update that role to grant them access to that new report, and potentially yourself access to the new report. That's really going to be all there is for the basics of Sage 300 Report Designer. Keep an eye out on our live streams. I have plans to go ahead and take this particular report and do a few more advanced things to it to give us even more usable information on it. So you can look forward to that sometime in the future. And then also, if you like our content, be sure to subscribe to the Bangert YouTube channel. Check out our the Bangert user group, and you can see how to get to all that stuff on the slide that'll end our live stream here. Thanks so much for joining, and have a great day.